Hello, everyone, and welcome back to TechDaily.ai. I'm David, and I am ready to dig into a news cycle that is, quite frankly, all over the map today.
It really is.
And joining me to help make sense of the madness is Sophia. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me. And you are right about the state of things. It feels like the supply chain is trying to tell us three different stories at once.
It really does. But before we get into the absolute whirlwind of rumors swirling around the iPhone 18, we have a quick message for our listeners.
Okay.
You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit techdaily.ai to get started today.
That's a fantastic opportunity, really, for anyone looking to get their voice out there.
It certainly is. Now, let's get right into the thick of it. The rumor mill for the iPhone 18 Pro is just, it's spinning faster than I've seen in years.
Oh, yeah.
We're seeing reports that aren't just slightly different. They are diametrically opposed. It's a total clash of the leakers right now.
For sure.
We're looking at a potential design overhaul that sounds a bit bizarre, a massive shakeup in the actual release calendar, and camera technology that might finally make me leave my dedicated camera at home.
It is a fascinating time to be watching the industry. Just to set the stage for everyone, it is currently early 2026. The iPhone 18 lineup, it isn't due until the fall.
Right, months away.
But the leaks are pouring in. And what's interesting is the divide. Some reports suggest Apple is just refining a winning formula, while others are screaming about radical new layouts.
So that's our job today, right? To sift through all this noise.
Exactly. We're looking at the design, the camera upgrades, and this very, very confusing new launch schedule to figure out what is actually coming down the pipe.
Okay, let's start with the most visual controversy, the design. There's this corner camera theory floating around.
Right. And when a leak is that specific, it usually means someone has seen a pretty convincing render or an image.
But let's just look at the claim. They're saying the selfie camera is moving from the center all the way to the top left corner.
And the visual they describe, they're saying the dynamic island isn't floating in the middle anymore.
It flies out from that top left corner?
That's the idea, yeah. It's a bold visualization. The concept is that you would have this interactive notification bubble expanding from the corner rather than the center.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. Does that not feel like a massive regression?
That's the question, isn't it?
We spent years getting rid of the notch, moving to the pill, centering everything for symmetry. Shoving it back in the corner feels almost like an Android phone from 2019. Why would they do that?
That is the skeptical question to ask. It breaks the symmetry Apple is obsessed with, and that is where the counter evidence comes in, which frankly makes a lot more sense from an engineering perspective.
Okay, so let's dissect that. Because usually where there's smoke, there's fire. But in this case, the fire's in a completely different place.
Exactly. The main counter report basically debunks the corner placement entirely. They are claiming the camera is staying dead center.
But then where does the other rumor come from?
Well, and here's where the technical nuance matters. They explain why the confusion happened. It appears the leakers were seeing internal schematics and, misinterpreting the movement of specific sensors.
So it's a game of telephone gone wrong in the supply chain. Someone sees a part moving left and just assumes the whole camera module is going with it.
Precisely. The nuance here is that while the selfie camera stays put, the Face ID components are shifting around, specifically the infrared flood illuminator.
The flood illuminator. That sounds intense, but it's just the part that blasts your face with IR light so the camera can see you in the dark, right?
Correct. And it's the smallest part of that Face ID array. The reports suggest it's moving under the display, specifically toward the left side.
Right.
However, the dot projector and the infrared camera, the heavy lifters that actually map the 3D geometry of your face, are remaining in the dynamic island in the center.
So let me get this straight. A leaker sees a schematic where the flood illuminator is shifted to the top left, and the takeaway becomes the dynamic island is moving.
That is the most likely scenario. It is a classic case of seeing a part of the puzzle and guessing the wrong picture. The end result for you, the user, is that the visible camera remains centered.
That feels so much more grounded in reality.
It does. Apple isn't ready to give up that brand identity just yet. The island is their signature look right now.
But even if it stays in the center, are we stuck with the same size? Because I saw some data that suggests we might finally get some of that screen real estate back.
Yes, this is the refinement part of the story. The data is quite specific. Currently, the dynamic island is about 20.76 millimeters wide. The rumor is that for the iPhone 18 Pro, it's shrinking down to 13.49 millimeters.
Okay, 20 millimeters down to 13. I have to ask, though, is that actually noticeable? We're talking about 7 millimeters.
It sounds small, but in the context of a handheld display, it is substantial.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. If you run the math, that is roughly a 35% reduction in width. Think about watching a video in full screen or playing a game. That black bar cuts into the content.
That's true. Yeah. It's a difference between a header and a full notification bar.
Exactly. If they can shave off 35% of the obstruction, the display feels so much more expansive. It aligns with Apple's history. Introduce a design element like the notch, then spend 3 or 4 years chipping away at it until the tech exists to hide it entirely.
So this is just the next step toward that all-screen dream.
Pretty significant step, yeah.
Speaking of keeping things the same versus changing them, let's talk about the back of the phone, the shelf design.
The shelf, yes.
The iPhone 17 Pro introduced this major redesign, that wide camera shelf and the two-tone finish.
Yeah.
And the word is that Apple is keeping this exact design for the iPhone 18.
This shouldn't come as a surprise if we just look at the financials.
Is it just about saving money on tooling?
Partly, but it's mostly about success. Look at the numbers. The iPhone 17 quarter brought in $85 billion in phone revenue alone. Sales were up 23% year over year.
23% is a lot for a market that people keep saying is saturated.
It is incredible growth. So from a boardroom perspective, the shelf design isn't broken. In fact, it's a hit. Consumers responded well to that visual change.
So why change the mold that just generated $85 billion?
You wouldn't. You just painted a different color.
Which brings us to the aesthetics. The fun part. Rumors of testing for burgundy, purple, and brown.
Brown is certainly a choice.
I'm trying to visualize this. Are we talking about a luxury leather vibe, or are we talking about like a 1970s station wagon?
It would likely be a metallic sort of bronze-like tone, but remember these are just testing colors alongside silver, orange, and blue. They often test colors that never make it to production.
Right, just to see how the anodization process holds up on the titanium.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Let's move away from the paint job and talk about the actual machinery. Because the biggest hardware rumor here isn't about how the phone looks. It's about how it sees.
The variable aperture.
Yes. This is the technology that photographers have been waiting for.
It really is.
But I want to push on this a bit. We've seen variable apertures on phones before, right? Samsung tried it years ago and then dropped it.
Yeah.
Why is this a big deal now? What's the actual benefit for a normal user?
To understand the benefit, we have to look at the physics. Smartphone sensors are getting bigger, and as the sensor gets bigger, the depth of field gets naturally shallower.
Meaning things get blurry up close when you don't want them to.
Precisely. Like if you take a picture of a document or a plate of food, the edges might be blurry. I've seen you complain about that.
I have. I try to scan a receipt, and only the middle line is in focus. It's so frustrating.
Exactly. That is the downside of a fixed wide aperture on a large sensor. A variable aperture functions like a mechanical iris. It can switch between f-stops. It could open up to, say, f1.5 for low light, but clamp down to f2.8 for bright daylight.
So it's actually moving parts inside the lens.
Yes. In low light, it physically opens to gulp in photons. But in bright light, stopping down does two things. First, it sharpens the image across the entire frame, fixing that blurry edge issue.
Okay, so sharper scans and food pics, I'm sold on that. But what about the cinematic look everyone wants?
That is the other side of the coin, authentic depth of field. Right now, portrait mode is a simulation. It's an algorithm cutting your shape out and blurring the rest.
And it fails.
Yeah.
It definitely fails. It blurs my glasses, or if I have messy hair, it just looks like a helmet.
With a variable aperture opening up wide on a large sensor, you don't need the algorithm. The physics of the lens create that natural bokeh, the creamy background blur. It separates the subject from the background optically, not digital.
So it's the difference between a CGI background and a real camera lens.
Precisely. It looks organic because it is organic.
That sounds fantastic. But usually there's a catch with this level of tech. Is this coming to the whole lineup?
And that is the catch. The reports say this might be exclusive to the iPhone 18 Pro Max.
Of course. You want the Pro camera? You buy the giant phone.
It comes down to internal volume. These mechanical systems take up physical space. Apple experimented with this for the 17 Pro but held it back. Now it looks ready, but the Pro Max is likely the only chassis with enough room to house it without compromising the battery.
So if I want authentic bokeh, I need big pockets.
Ye-
Literally.
Pretty much.
Are there any other camera updates? Or is the aperture the main event?
There's mention of a simple side camera control button, likely addressing feedback that the capacitive sliders were too fiddly, and continued 5G satellite connectivity.
Okay, so we have a refined front, a familiar back, and a potentially revolutionary camera system in the biggest model. But here is where the story shifts from specs to strategy.
This is a strategic shift that could fundamentally change how the industry operates.
I mean, we are conditioned to expect September to be the event.
Yeah.
Tim Cook comes out, new iPhones, boom, everyone upgrades. But now there's talk of a split launch.
Yes. Let's break down this rumored roadmap for late 2026 and early 2027. It looks like a hard bifurcation of the product line. Fall 2026, this coming September, we only get the high end. The iPhone 18 Pro, the iPhone 18 Pro Max, and the foldable iPhone.
Wait, hold on. The foldable. It's listed in the fall lineup. For years we've heard it's coming. But to put it in the fall slot, that says something about how they view it, doesn't it?
It speaks volumes. If the foldable launches in September alongside the Pros, Apple is designating it as a flagship, a primary device. It's not a niche experiment or a spring refresh. It's a main driver.
So we finally get the iPhone Fold. But where does that leave the regular iPhone 18, the one most people actually buy?
That is the other half of the split. The standard iPhone 18, the iPhone 18, and potentially an iPhone Air 2, those aren't coming in the fall.
When then?
They're rumored for spring 2027, 6 months later.
That is a massive gap. Why would they do that? Why miss the entire holiday season for your volume seller?
Think about the inventory and the psychology of it. By focusing the fall entirely on the Pro, Pro Max, and Foldable, Apple is filling the shelves with their highest margin, most expensive devices right before the gifting season.
Right, so if you walk into an Apple store in December wanting a new iPhone, you literally cannot buy a cheap one.
You have to buy the Pro or the Foldable.
Wow.
It forces the average selling price way up. Then, in the spring, when sales traditionally slump after the holidays, they drop the more affordable, colorful consumer models to revitalize revenue.
It smoothens out the revenue curve for them.
It does, and it stops the Pro and base models from cannibalizing each other's attention.
It makes business sense, but as a consumer, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
It basically tells me, if you aren't spending over $1,000, wait until next year.
That's the message.
Speaking of spending money, are we looking at a price hike for these fall flagships?
Unfortunately, the signs are pointing to yes.
Is this just standard inflation, or is there a hardware reason?
It is hardware specific. Analysts have pointed out that RAM costs, so memory, are rising significantly. Apple is now negotiating memory prices quarterly instead of every 6 months.
That implies a lot of volatility in the market.
It does. And remember, with all the AI features running on device, these phones need more fast RAM than ever before. That cost has to go somewhere.
And it usually goes to the consumer's credit card bill.
Correct. A price hike is very likely. However, Apple has a buffer. They plan to offset some of this strain via their services, Revenue iCloud, Apple Music, TV Plus.
Right. The ecosystem lock-in. Even if they sell fewer phones because of the price, they make it up on the monthly subscriptions.
That is the long-term play.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've covered a lot of contradictory ground.
I have.
To recap, on the front, we have a battle of designs. The corner camera theory feels like a misinterpretation, while the centered theory with a 35% smaller dynamic island seems much more plausible.
Agreed. The refinement story just holds more water than the radical redesign.
Then we have the camera, the variable aperture. This feels like the main reason to upgrade if you're a pro user. Genuine optical depth of field, better low light, but likely locked behind the Pro Max wall.
It is the standout feature for sure.
And finally, the strategy. A potential world where the new iPhone event is actually two events. Pros and foldables in the fall for the big spenders, and standard models in the spring for everyone else.
It is a lot to digest, and frankly, it changes the calculus for anyone planning to upgrade. If you are sitting on an iPhone 15 or 16 right now, you really have to decide, do you need the cutting edge this fall, or can you wait until spring 2027?
It's a tough call. And frankly, the idea of a foldable finally being in the mix just complicates it even more.
It does, but connecting all these dots raises a really important question for the bigger picture.
What's that?
If Apple really does split the launch into fall for pros and spring for the base models, are we seeing the end of the iPhone as a singular cultural monolith? Are they basically admitting that the pro user and the standard user are now two completely different species that shouldn't even be shopping in the same season?
That is a fascinating way to look at it. We
Yeah.
might be moving from iPhone season to just tech seasons. targeted, specific, and expensive.
It certainly looks that way.
Well, that is something for you to mull over as you look at your current device. Are you a fall customer or a spring customer? I want to thank you for walking us through the supply chain maze today.
My pleasure. It is always fun to hunt for the truth in the noise.
And thank you to all of you for listening. This has been our look into the chaotic future of the iPhone. Make sure to check out techdaily.ai for more updates. We'll catch you in the next one.